Figure that'll keep everybody here.
My oldest comes in tomorrow.
6:31, we have quorum.
Comes back Friday.
We start.
Have our first family portrait.
I knew those cookies were a mistake.
I'm through this one.
6:31, can we start, please? Sam? I feel like the principal. Sam, Dick, pay attention. Call the meeting to order. Roll call on any ones that are missing. I believe Ms. Pickett and Mr. Camerano or Mr. Fidel. So we have 6 members here. We are again being recorded. As usual, I have to get a copy of Walter's little speech. I love it, but I always forget to ask him for it. Is there anyone else that wishes to record? Seeing none, just be aware that we are being recorded. Citizens' participation. Anyone from the public wish to speak? I'm hearing nothing. Next will be the approval of the meeting minutes for December 7th. Can I entertain a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second?
Second.
Any corrections?
She makes me look better
Position?
since she knows than I am.
Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? December 14th.
I abstained because I wasn't here.
I'm sorry. So it's 501.
You weren't here?
No.
Not for December 7th.
December 14th. December 14th was the meeting with the selectmen. It was the presentation of the audit, etc. We did not take any minutes that day. It's my understanding that the minutes were taken by the selectmen's department, basically. So I have nothing to present to you tonight. Kelly, did they present you any minutes?
I spoke to Janet and she said it was on the DVD, and when they're done, when she finishes transcribing, we can get a copy of those. But she said it is on DVD.
All right, unless anyone has any objections for our minutes, what I'll do is I'll have Kelly Boyd just a note saying that the reference, the permanent record in the selectman's office. And we can bring that up at the next meeting. I'd like to make I'd like to juggle the agenda a little bit tonight. I'd like to actually discuss some unanticipated items because I had some things come to me at the very, very last minute, and they're important, and I want to make sure that everyone's aware of them. So, does anyone have any objection if I bring unanticipated up? I would like to I received a letter from Dr. Rabinovitz. Said at the last school board meeting, the committee voted to establish a designer selection committee for the selection among various submittals for a Wareham Public School master plan study. I'm enclosing a copy of the RFQ, which was sent to solicit proposals. The composition of the designer selection committee will be superintendent of schools, one school committee representative, one member of the finance committee, one member of capital planning board, one local builder, one local architect, and the director of operations/finance. That's of the school system. I'm proposing Monday, January 23rd, 2012 at 6:30 p.m. for our first meeting. Please consult with your board and send me the name of the finance committee representative who can attend at least 2 Monday night evenings or meetings. The selection committee will be charged with creating a rubric to rate proposals received and to rate the proposals by that rubric. Why are we proposing a master plan study? I believe it is prudent to take stock of our facilities and do a space needs study to support our statement of interest to the Massachusetts Building Authority and look at the needs of the school system through the next 10 years. This is actually the first step of a process by which we apply for a grant to either renovate or build new schools. Basically, yes, they are putting together a committee. It will be subject to the open meeting laws. I discussed with him today. It will be posted. Everyone should be aware. I would caution you, though, that since it is basically the discussion for a bid, there is the potential that it could, if it does, fall under the open meeting law requirements. I would say for an executive committee session, it could fall into that. I would hope they would give a full explanation of what was happening first before they went into such. But basically, our liaison is probably our best candidate. However, I'd like to have an alternative in case he can't make the 2 meetings.
Yeah, the June
The second Monday in particular, I'm gonna be in Montana, so I will not be here for that.
So you may not be able to make a second meeting at the end of the month or.
That would be correct.
Would anyone else have any interest in doing that? Mr. McDonald, anyone else?
I do have interest only because I have a child in the school system and I have that interest and I think that.
All right, I did talk to Dr. Rabinowitz very quickly. Evidently, this is a analysis of the space. They examine all the buildings, look what they're being used for, the classes, et cetera. But it is also the first step of the other process, which is applying for the grant, which would require more funds, et cetera. He's brought that up a few times. So, if nobody has any objections, I'll appoint Mr. McDonald. Would anyone else be able to fill in if he's unable in the end to make it?
Question, might I attend the first one even if I'm not the representative, or is there only one?
Only, well, it'll be a public meeting, so anybody's welcome to attend, all right? The question is you hate to split it up where somebody
Oh, no,
attends
no,
one and then
I'm-
doesn't attend the other.
Exactly.
I'm not,
So if anyone else can make the
I'm not
first meeting.
suggesting
Right,
that, I was just interested, that's all.
that's the key, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recommend that if Sam can't make the both meetings, then maybe we should have Mr. McDonald represent and participate in both meetings for us.
Well, I think
That's
what
what he's.
Okay.
that's what I'm proposing at this point. I'm also looking if Sam pretty much is sure he can't make it, if someone else thinks there might be a possibility they could make the two, and they're willing to attend, that would be very helpful. Although if they're going to executive session, that means, it is for a bid, it is for a quote, yes.
I just want to be clear that this meeting's at 6:30, so not
It's at
6:30
6:30,
a.m.,
right,
so.
right. And the whole meeting may be open to the public, but there is a possibility because of the
Okay.
type of thing that they're trying to do. If you put the rubric out completely with your scoring and somebody goes and somebody doesn't, it can cause a unbalanced bid, so.
Okay.
It'll be his decision in the end. The next thing I want to bring up is, some questions have come up about public hearings. I went back to the town charter and reviewed the town charter, and it is very clear that you have to pick up a calendar to look very closely. You suddenly discover that our public hearing, which traditionally has been held just before the closing of the warrant, et cetera, has been pretty much in April. However, that's not what the town charter says. The town charter says we basically should have it by December 30th, which would have been an impossibility this year because we didn't have the audit. We were missing information from the Department of Revenue, et cetera. So what I have done though is to take a look at our schedule going forward. We have tonight's meeting, the 11th. We have the meeting all day long with the department heads. I'm wondering if you would like to defer that evening's meeting to that day as part of the meeting rather than taking a supper break and coming back. Some members I know might not be able to make the daytime. What's the general feeling on that?
I'm all for a daytime meeting personally.
Keep it all in the daytime? What I could do, we're supposed to run, I think, from 8:30 to 4. Question is if we run short. I don't see any reason why I couldn't post a 3:30 meeting as well. It's gotta be posted for the full day, but we can adjourn and reopen.
I'm still iffy, but I'm working on it.
Pardon?
Confusing me.
Well, if we get done with the department heads, let's say at 3 o'clock,
Yeah.
all right? If I set it at like 4:30, then other people who might not be able to make it during the day might be able to make the evening meeting. I'll join us.
Okay,
I'll play it by ear, never mind. You know
no,
what,
no, no,
we'll just go into
confused as to
recess.
what you posted an additional meeting for.
Normally, we would meet on the 11th in the evening, but we are meeting during the day with the department heads.
Okay.
If 5 of us are in attendance, it is a meeting, it has to be
Right,
posted
yeah.
as such and open to the public, which it will be. There'll be 5 of us there, no doubt. All right, the question is not everybody will make that meeting. However, there will be other issues that people may want to speak about. So normally we meet in the
Okay,
evening. I'm
alright.
saying it's an
Okay.
awfully long day. What I'll do is I'll post the meeting. If worst comes to worst, I can always go into recess.
Okay.
And then those who have
Because you swung from one thing to another. You were talking about a public hearing and then you swung into that, so you kind of swung around me and I was a little
Oh, no, the
confused.
public hearing is going to be on, I'm sorry, the public hearing is on the 25th,
Okay.
okay? We were not going to have a meeting, I lost myself there. The meeting will be on the 25th. It's already been sent to the newspapers to be published. We will basically be discussing the proposed budget that evening in a public hearing.
So the 11th is 8:30 until
The
what?
11th is, I believe, 8:30 to 4. I'll get you the exact posting on that one. Kelly, did we post that already or not?
Yeah.
But that's the all-day meeting of all the various department heads. All right, and then the question is do we want to go beyond the department heads?
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
Okay, the 18th is the meeting with the school department and the board of selectmen. It's a joint meeting, joint public hearing that we have to attend,
That's one?
the 18th, and that's mandatory by charter. And then on the 25th, we'll have, delayed by 30 days, we'll have the public hearing on the proposed budget. I would not like to see that be the only public hearing on it. I think we should go through our deliberative process as we normally have in the past and have the traditional hearing before we go to the actual town meeting.
What is the time of the 18th? Is that in the BOS office? Or in,
The 18th is the school department. I'll send everybody a note on that.
just mind where it is.
Because the time shift, they normally meet at 7 o'clock, but I'll confirm that for you. So basically, we're gonna meet every day, every Wednesday, in the month of January.
Mhm.
All right, the other thing that happened today is we received a notification from the Department of Revenue that our tax rate has been set. All right, I sent everybody a copy this afternoon.
I was able to pull your letter off, but I couldn't get into the web and get it.
Yeah.
All right, if you go to the Department of Revenue website,
Okay,
all right,
yeah, DOR, okay.
you can find the various reports. And Kelly, we made copies, didn't we? It's in the file. Kelly, did we give everybody a copy in the folder or? the Department of Revenue?
I didn't get that.
No,
You
okay,
didn't get that. All right.
okay.
No problem. If you go to the Department of Revenue sites, and these reports look relatively new to me, I don't remember ever seeing them before with the Department of Revenue. I can also pass these around so you'll know what you're looking for. For the record, the tax rates is set at 937.
Did you pass these out to him?
That's a while ago.
Okay.
All right, tax rate's at 937. The Onset Fire District is 193, and the Wareham Fire District is 188. I'll pass these around. Please don't walk off with these. It's my only copy.
Just throw it.
All right. The other thing would be Mass Municipal. Don, you said that you wanted to go. I'll get the form for you and me. Is there anyone else that would like to go to that? Dick, I know historically you've gone. Would you like to go as
To
well?
the MMA,
MMA annual convention, or
I'll probably go and I'll pay my own way.
with the group payers as
We've
well?
done in the past.
Well, when is that? What was the other?
January.
It's January 20th and 21st.
Mhm.
All right. So what I'll do is I'll send you a copy of the form.
Okay.
I'll send you a copy.
Okay.
And, I mean, anyone else interested in going, or? No? Okay. As I said, I noticed in the public hearing. Back to the agenda. Try to bring, I just want to make sure we did not leave today before those came up. I'm sorry for the confusion. Town administrator's report, obviously town administrator is not here today, nor is the finance analyst, but they did send us the October financials. There's some apologies for, make sure Kelly gets one, not sending us a narrative on this. So the reason for it being that a lot of effort was put into trying to work with the state to get the tax rates set today. And that pretty much consumed all of our internal resources, as well as the town accountant, the BMAG, and another working with Powers and Sullivan. So, It was a pleasant surprise to hear today that they had managed to set the tax rate. It's only been 2 weeks since we had the audit. And my understanding is the state DOR is also in possession of all the paperwork necessary to do free cash. However, the individual responsible for it postponed his vacation to get our tax rate. So he's on vacation for the next couple of days. So I would expect we would see it very early in January. We would hear the number. So that's pretty encouraging. I'm also been told by the administration that BMAD did a tremendous amount of work and did a great job pulling this together. So I'm very pleased on that one. So that's the status on the state reports. You have the monthlies for the month of October. And remember, the reports are year to date, and for the budget number, Derek said this time you put in basically, I think it was 4/12 as the projected, but you're still going to have some problems with some seasonality on some accounts. That's all I think. Next item on the agenda is the 2011 audit. Any comments? I'm tired of talking. What did everyone think? Sam, what were your thoughts on the audit?
Well, one, I was happy to see it. Two, I was happy to see a reasonably unqualified audit letter. Those were my immediate thoughts.
Dick, any your thoughts on it?
Well, I have several. I'm glad you asked. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The very first thing that comes to mind here in looking at the budget.
No, this is on the audit.
On the audit.
On the
Okay.
audit, please.
On the audit, sorry. I'm still disturbed about the $919,000. I realize that it appears to be, I won't say inconsequential, but from what I can gather, would be, quote, too expensive to try to figure it out. I happen to disagree with that conclusion, so that's what I have to say about it.
I don't quite feel that was Mr. Powers' explanation in total. He said it would be very expensive to do. However, they had done a complete audit of all cash transactions and found that the treasurer's books and bank accounts were in fact in balance, and that the difference between the cash books and the general ledger were the entries that had been made supposedly to try to balance the general ledger where there were discrepancies with those books. That the entries themselves created a $919,000 balance that never existed, cash that never existed. It was an accounting error in the general ledger. All right, but I hate to continue to feel that some way some cash might have walked, because their claim is that they went over all the cash transactions.
Well, to that, Mr. Chairman, I would say that he did qualify it and said, if you remember, and I'm sure you do, that he's very sure, I don't know they use 99%, but he did say and implied strongly that he's not 100% certain.
Well, he's not 100% certain because coming out of 2009, he had to roll a cash balance that they weren't certain about either.
That's...
All right, and you know, that's 2009. That's all he can speak to, or 9 and 10. All right, and as long as he doesn't know what the 9 number is, it's pretty hard to come back and say, well. But what he can say for 10 is he went every cash transaction.
Well, let me move to a different subject. The health trust, the IBNR is drawn down to, and I don't have it in front of me, down to about $250,000, give or take. And as you may or may not remember, when we had our health trust official here, outside consultant, I asked her about the loss ratio. And I had to ask her, she did not volunteer it. And it had been 92%, but then she admitted that it had just gone up to, more recently, to 97%. I don't know if anybody else remembers that conversation.
No, then that's a serious budget question.
It is it's a serious budget question, and again, back to the audit, we have a problem with the incurred but not reported. It has gone down substantially. There's very little wiggle room left there. So as another observation, I would say that that's a problem of some concern to me, and I would suggest it should be of everybody in the committee and to everybody in town. We just don't have the flexibility that we should have in terms of reserves. So that's the second observation. I won't take any more time on that subject. I'm more interested, shouldn't say more interested, I'm interested in hearing what other people have to say and then down to the operating budget.
Lonnie, on the audit?
Well, I'm pleased that, he's comfortable with his conclusions. As to the $919,000, he answered my question that night of, it's not like it disappeared, and I try to explain this to people when they stop me on the street. It didn't disappear, but I don't think we can continue to beat ourselves up over it either. There is a small concern that, if funds were put in the wrong accounting pocket, as you put it, will we have problems later on if we haven't figured that out? That concerns me a little bit, but I don't think that they're going to go through the expense of figuring it out either. So I'm relatively comfortable with it going forward. Like you said, he can't justify anything before 2009, and I think we have to just settle with that and never let any of this stuff happen again.
Mr. McDonald?
When I kind of went into the meeting, I was concerned, because here we are sitting on an unqualified opinion, and then I got a 19-page management letter with pretty much the same thing we saw in 2010. And my big concern was how do we reconcile from serious issues that still exist to an unqualified opinion? And I think he answered it fairly clear that they did a cash proof. And to him, that's, he said cash is king in the business, so he's comfortable with that. I still don't think he's comfortable, and I don't believe from what he said he's comfortable with the fact that we have that many material weaknesses, and those need to be addressed. And
No, let's stick to the audit, because we're
That is the
going to
audit.
come back to the management.
That is
still
part
part
of
of the audit.
Well, then I guess I should wait till the management letter to address what I have to say.
No, you link the two, but don't
But
carry
my
the
point
two.
being is that I think that the problem still exists, and the point was made that we need to be able to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And the only way to really do that is to either have policies in place to do that, or something, because it still exists. The problem still exists. It was quite clear that those problems still exist, and I just don't want to go through an audit next year and come to the same place we're at this year. I think that needs to be resolved.
Okay, Mrs. Brown?
I really don't want to say much on this because I'm still a bit agitated by the whole process, because I'm very happy with Mr. Powers and Mr. Sullivan, and I believe that we're all trying to work together on resolving these issues, but I still feel that I believe that the top is responsible for this accounting disaster. And I don't want to see it next year. He says, well, I've seen it for 2 years. And I'm aggravated about it. I'm concerned. And people make mistakes, Mr. Chairman, and I fully understand that. But we don't reward people with bonuses and pay increases when they continue to make mistakes. And I have a real concern about the financial health of this community.
In regards to the audit you have?
Well,
Are you
Yeah.
uncomfortable with the audit?
am I comfortable with the audit?
Not with the
Yes,
results in the audit.
I'm comfortable with the audit, but I'm not comfortable with, I'm comfortable with the audit, just leave it at
All right, if we can move on to the management letter, sorry, Sam, you had something?
Just, I came away from that discussion believing, A, that yes, he had checked the cash and he felt comfortable on that. But more than that, that he had concluded that the errors were entries, and even perhaps as much as the entries, the attempt to correct the incorrect entries, which doubled up the problem. I came away with the feeling that he was confident that he had located the problem. Now, maybe I came away with the wrong feeling on that, and I certainly stand to be corrected, but
I do too.
I came away with the feeling that
Yeah.
he had pretty well put his finger on it and said, you know, I know where the problem was, I know it wasn't cash, and I know what did the problem. You know,
I agree with that.
he felt, certain is never a good word, but he felt, he was reasonably certain, let me use those words, that's not his words, that he had found the problem and corrected it. Now, that does not address going further in future years, obviously. It's only addressing the audit.
Mrs. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to know, from my own point, how my colleagues feel about, how comfortable you feel about for next year.
That's
Well, now we're progressing into the management letter.
No, we're not, okay, well, I'm just,
Now we're progressing into the management letter. I would make the comment on, Powers and Sullivan has only one product, right? They provide services, but they only have one product, and their product is that management letter. His entire reputation as an accounting firm depends upon that management letter. For him to issue an unqualified letter is extremely important to his business and its reputation. So he had to have a high degree of confidence to do that, otherwise he would have issued a qualified letter. That would have been the safest thing for him, right, as far as the business was concerned, but obviously he didn't feel justified. So that's how I measured his comfort by the fact that, you know, he's putting all his eggs in the basket and saying, I believe in this.
When I spoke about it at the meeting, I remember clearly what he said to me, because somebody, I don't know who it was, one of the selectmen said something about having a clean audit. He said, I wouldn't classify it as a clean audit. It's a clean audit opinion, but you have several issues to work on. That's basically what he said. But to go back to the 919, he gave us the opportunity to say, if you want to go back and look at it, we'll go back and look at it. And probably at $175 an hour, it's going to cost you to look at it. But he doesn't feel like the amount of money in it, and this is when you get into cost of business, is it worth the money to go back and basically, I know everybody likes to throw around the term forensic audit, but the reality is a forensic audit is very, very, very expensive. And that's what they would have to do. They would have to go over every entry, start to finish, and it would probably cost us a tremendous amount of money, and we're already paying a very high premium because we've had the issues we've had. So I'm not happy that they don't have an answer for the 919, or not a full answer for the 919, but I'm comfortable, and I think when I first got on the committee, the question was asked, clean starting balances for 2011, and Mr. Powers said, we have clean starting balances for 2011, and to me, if you have your cash and going forward into 2011 audit, I'm comfortable with that. So at some point, you either have to let it go or pay the money to do it, and I just don't think it's worth the money to go back and let anybody else out there want to talk about why it's there. But the reality is, I don't think it has to do with cash. I think it just really has to do with the VADAR, black hole of VADAR, and really poor performance.
I think, my personal opinion is, Mr. Powers would more than gladly, I think, take the money
Oh, yeah.
at the $175 an hour, except if he's relatively confident that he's not going to come up with something to show you, because then it becomes a black mark on him.
We offered.
But he
said
did
we can
offer.
certainly do it.
Yeah, he did offer. I
So-
think, but I got the impression that he didn't think he was going to find very much, if anything, because as he looked over the entries,
I have that same feeling.
a lot was generated by the system itself.
I got the feeling he would certainly spend the time to come back and,
Of course, he would.
And,
$175 an hour.
yeah, he could pretty much put it in.
I would too.
Yeah.
I'll do it for
That island
$150.
he's been looking for in the Bahamas, but it wasn't, and I don't see it as a good value for the town. I just don't, that's a lot of money we don't need to spend just to make who happy. I think going forward, we know what our starting balances are in 2011. They're good, clean. He's done a cash proof. He's comfortable with that, and you know, our focus, segueing on to your next thing, is a management letter. That's really the focus for me.
Mrs. Brown?
I'm very comfortable with the Powers and Sullivan, what they do. I'm very comfortable and confident with the firm that's doing our accounting now. And, hopefully we all learned a lesson, meaning the FinCom, the Board of Selectmen, the administration. And we really need to stay on top of things financially, particularly in these difficult times that we're in. And we have to do it in a more friendly way, but we have to publicly get our opinion out there. Whether it be good, whether it be bad, but we need to try and make people aware of things. And
We'll do that going forward. The management letter? Sam, would you start with you again? Before I do that, can I preface something? So, for those who are not really familiar in the audit process, first off, the audit is to the selectmen. It belongs to the selectmen. They are the sole executive, or they are the sole chief executives of the town. So the audit is theirs. It's not the town administrators, it's not the town accounts, it belongs to the Board of Selectmen. The management letter is the accounting firm's guidance to management as to what needs to be improved with internal controls. All right, again, it belongs to the Board of Selectmen. Now, they have, obviously, by town charter, their employee, the town administrator, is supposed to deal with whatever they commit to, the auditors, to correct, and how they commit to correct it. And I think as we talk about the management letter, we should keep that in mind, that it is to the Board of Selectmen, it is not to the town administrator or anyone else that's actually working as an employee. Sam?
Basically, I'd go back to a comment I made a number of months ago that I think the most important thing that we have to do, and certainly the town has to do from a financial viewpoint, is to make sure that we have decent figures and financials to work with, because without that, it's very hard to make any progress at all. Clearly, we had a long period of time where we didn't have an auditor. We had a fill-in person who was working, and I think doing a good job given what she was and the job that she had to do.
You said auditor, did you mean accountant?
Accountant, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I apologize.
Want to clear that up?
Thank you. But we clearly did not have people in place to really correct the problems. I think I'm confident that we now do have such a person in place. And I'm confident that those problems can be cleared up. Am I surprised that in this management letter we're saying that the same problems exist? I'd be astonished if it was any different, because we've been doing nothing that would tend to correct those problems. But I think we've not only got a clean audit letter, and I was corrected earlier today that it wasn't a clean audit as much as a clean audit letter. We do have a clean audit letter, and I think we have the people in place to make the corrections that we obviously need in the accounting system. If any of those problems, or I shouldn't say if any of those problems, if those problems existed a year from now, I would be extremely disappointed and outraged that they did, but I do not think that's going to be the case.
Mr. Colvin?
I would second mostly what Sam has suggested. I guess a couple of things that stood out in the audit letter. I won't go over the negatives. There were too many, would be here all night. But there were a couple of suggestions that caught my eye, one of which we have talked about in the past, and that deals with snow and ice. In the management letter, it suggested that what we should do or consider, and they use 3 or 5 year rolling average. I would strongly recommend to this committee that we pursue that particular assessment suggestion so that we get away from the fiction, if you will, that our snow and ice every year is whatever the number is, $185,000, $190,000, and the next year we come back and ask for, pick a number, $200,000 or $300,000, and we're not dealing with reality, in my opinion. So that, in terms of one thing that stood out in terms of a suggestion that I would make for discussion with the administrator and to the selectmen, that we understand that, and I do understand what would happen and why it's not done that way, that to have a rolling average, because the number would go up, taxpayers would have to pay more, and they wouldn't like that, but, you know, you can't get away from the fact that you have to pay it just a year later. So, I think it's time for people to step up, stand up and say, let's take care of this, it's in the audit letter, it is a suggestion. I won't say end of story because it's gonna continue from here, but that would be my suggestion, my observation and suggestion.
You said you had a second point?
No, that's the important one in terms of the one that comes to mind.
Fine.
I would agree with Dick on his statement. There was a couple of things in there that I was surprised about as far as their suggestions that we have been flatly told we don't do that. And I would hope that the town administrator and the board of selectmen really get behind, you know, their letter and start to get these things rolling. You know, I don't see any other choice. We've got to do it. We've got to do better than we have.
Mr. McDonald?
The snow and ice is at, I believe it's 577,434 right now, so I might want to take notice of that. I have kind of a queasy feeling about the whole thing. I think they will do better this year because I believe this firm is on top of the ball. I don't know what's going to happen if we hire a town accountant. I don't know how that's going to happen, but the one thing that, maybe it's just that after 29 years of doing this, if you don't have policies and procedures in place, this is going to happen again. And maybe down the road, may not be this year, maybe next year, if we don't have something to point to. And that's a critical issue. I think that went back and forth, I don't know how many times at the meeting, and I'm not sure anybody agreed on how to handle it, but the reality is, if you don't have something to go by, and you go back in and say, this is what you should have been doing, they're saying, look, I don't have anything to go by, and you're back to square one. So I think instead of being reactive, it's time for us to be a little proactive. Not us personally, I think the selectmen, because they are the policy-making board, and they do give the directive to the town administrator, but I think it's time to be a little more proactive going forward so that we don't sit through this again. And also I want to mention that the DOR report from 2009, I believe it is, if you take that and match it up, there are still some items in there that may or may not have an impact on what's going on now, too.
Mrs. Brown?
Again, you know, there were many deficiencies, but I think we all want to move forward. I mean, nobody gains, when somebody fails, we all fail, we lose. But I'm concerned that when somebody tells us something is okay, we can't just take it as word. We have to have, you know, some sort of backup that things are okay too. And what concerned me specifically is things that are getting voted on even at town meeting. You know, where's the checks and balances to see that, you know, it's going forward or what? And I don't have that level of comfort yet. I truly don't. And I believe that the administration has all the you know, the best that they want to bring forward. I think, you know, we should be encouraged and work with them, but I still feel that we need to be a little bit more detailed when it comes to the votes and how they're handled. I've had many people, and this wasn't in the management letter, we voted sewer commission, nothing's happened. I mean, and that's just one thing. There are several other things, the virtualization, we voted, what, was it $400,000? How much did they spend on it? How much did they actually spend on it? I think it was a lot more than that, but do we know for sure? And I think these are things that we need to be aware of and make people aware of. Yes, it is the selectmen are responsible, but it's our job to advise the selectmen. If the selectmen want to
It's our
listen.
job to advise town meeting.
Town meeting, exactly. But I mean, I'm in my experience, generally the selectmen have been very responsive to the FinCom too.
Mhm.
And the work, and I mean, why wouldn't anybody? If somebody's gonna give you accurate information and try and help you out, you're gonna wanna be there with them. And I just feel that, that these things have to be looked at much more carefully. When we approve something at the town meeting, when the town approves, the town meeting approves a number, we better darn well stick to that number or go back to the town and find out, let's tell them, we can't do it for that, we need more money. And I don't think that's being done. I think that, we're just going about and doing things.
I think that's somewhat inclusive in the management letter. Typically, what would happen with the management letter, to go on with the process on the audits, is that the receiver of the letter responds to whatever the audit firm says, and that's when the letter becomes final. I'll follow up as to whether or not that's going to happen, and if so, I'll request that we receive that final.
Copies.
Said it
Yeah.
was
So we
pretty
see
much
what the,
final.
yes, the final should have their responses on it. But again, they can also refuse to respond to anything as well, but the auditor typically would note that as well. My general feeling on the thing was the 2009 and 2010 letters, other than taking the critical items and calling them other matters, was exactly the same. Continuously, their recommendation for action was the development of policies and procedures. And I understand, some people disagree with me very strongly on that, but I think the audit firm made themselves very clear on that they want to see policies and procedures in place next year. Those policies do not have to be written from the top down. They can be, much like the police department, they can be done by the people who have to deal with it every day, making strong recommendations to the executive of the town as to what those policies and procedures should be. In line with that, I'm going to move to the next item that's on the agenda. Both the DOR and Powers and Sullivan have made a strong recommendation repeatedly to the town of the formation of an audit committee. And an audit committee is not somebody you go through and audit the books. An audit committee is an organization that typically looks at the management letter and says, are we making progress? All right, and they usually meet only 4 times a year, 1 to receive the letter, and 2 times to monitor the letter, what the progress is on the letter, and the last time is typically to say, well, did we do it or didn't we do it? Okay? I would hope that this board would, in fact, strongly urge now the Board of Selectmen to form an audit committee. And I would like to make that public in a letter.
Well, I make a motion that we make it public in a letter.
I'll second that.
Second, the motion, do we have any discussion?
I think it's critical. I really do. I think we also need to make sure that, that we have some presence on that committee, the audit committee, in some form or fashion.
That's up to them, they don't have to.
Well, I would
Okay.
recommend, that's what I recommend came out.
Well, we can recommend it around.
I just recommended that. I didn't say, trust me,
Maybe our letter could suggest it, but I'm not gonna say we should by any means demand it.
oh, well, I
All right,
wouldn't. I don't think we heard demand. I'm
No,
happy with
no,
what I take, but
All right, I think the thing is we should address at this point the issue that an audit committee should be
Well,
formed. That's what I would be most comfortable with writing. Again, I'll pass it by you, you'll be free to amend it once it gets here, but I just want authorization to put the letter together. Don?
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of an audit committee to work together on this situation. And I want to reiterate that last year's DOR report, I think the administration did a fantastic job in identifying, he had a slew of problems there. And he attacked them weekly. And I think it got set by the side when everything went down the chute with the accounting. And I believe that the administration would be very, very much in favor of having an audit committee.
I
As
have
long
no
as,
idea.
you know, as long as we were just there for facts and for support, or to help and support in a positive way, I think it's wonderful.
Our letter would be to the Board of Selectmen, because they're the
Exactly.
ones who can form committees.
Exactly. And as long as it's a positive thing and we can, you know, work together, I would think that they would be receptive to it.
I would hope so. Anyone other comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's 3, 5, 6.
Seems there's smiley things in the
Zero.
letter too.
And keeping it
Very
seasonal.
funny. Next item on the agenda is the department head meeting. We are set for the all-day meeting on the 11th. I have reserved with the town administrator our right to call back a department head, particularly the large departments, all right, if we need further explanation on items. That's why I said department head meeting dates. I would pretty much like to wait until we know for sure who we would like back and try to do all those in one night. So nothing else I'm looking at. Also, even our own attendance, I'd like to make sure that everybody's there for the critical evenings. What I would like to do on the budget is, we're supposed to meet with them on the 11th. In the past, there was always a compiling of the questions, shall we say. That's no longer legal under the open meeting law. You're supposed to pretty much do everything out in the open, so if I say, send me all your suggestions, it gets pretty hairy as to whether or not I've, violated it by some means. So what I would like to do is I would like everybody to bring their questions back next week. Let's get them in writing. At that point, they'll be entered into the minutes as a document, all right, and then I can compile them. And the object being that we will ask them the day that we meet with them to address those particular questions. All right, and I would say everything's open. Whatever you want to ask, let's get it on paper, all right, and then we can go from there. That's not to preclude any discussion tonight if somebody wants to discuss something, but what I really want to do is I want to make sure that the department heads are pretty clear on what they're going to be asked. I don't want gotchas at that meeting. We need explanations. We don't need gotchas. All right, so I'd like to compile those next week. I'll need them in writing. If you're not going to be able to attend, drop them off to Kelly sometime on Wednesday. All right, so that we can.
But by noon, because she leaves at
By noon, because she leaves by noon. As somebody found out today. All right, if you would drop them off with her, and then I'll make sure that we have them and we'll go over them that night.
Just one question. Obviously, we're gonna have a little bit of time to compile questions, but are you saying that we can't ask additional questions, or?
We'll be able to ask additional questions along the way, et cetera. What I would like to do is really, there's gonna be certain items that we're gonna wanna know from all the department heads. I know there's gonna be payroll questions. What's your full-time equivalents? What's your ups, what's your downs? Why have your payroll numbers changed? We're gonna hear about union contracts, we're gonna hear about change shifts and hours or stuff like that. There may be questions we might have on overtime, et cetera. All right, well, that's pretty much gonna be standard for every department head. So we're gonna wanna make sure that that is on our list of questions that they can see. But in other departments, I'll take the police department. If Route 6 goes through and they start construction, how is that gonna be accounted for, and what do we see the overtime on that? And how do we account for the police overtime? So we can get very specific in some other areas. And, because also that relates back to the audit where, overtime is being billed out of the office and paid into the general fund, and there's a problem in the audit as to the stuff getting paid. So there's a number of things that we can ask, to Dick's point, on the pension fund, et cetera. We're gonna wanna know a lot more information on what we're looking at going forward. Definitely the question on the healthcare. All right, if they have to bring someone else in, then they have to bring someone else in. But I don't want to go on the 11th and sit there with a bunch of gotchas, and we get no answers, and we walk out with nothing, because it'll take us weeks again to get the answers. I'd rather go in ahead of time and tell them,
They should be
I
prepared.
don't think we should even require them to respond in writing. It's just be prepared. This is our list, and we're gonna ask it, right? And everybody will have a copy, and we'll just ask it when we meet with them.
Yeah, and it's only a fair thing to do to them. I mean,
Right.
let them be prepared and
And there'll be certain questions that we'll probably see 3 or 4 people who want to ask that question, we'll make it a high priority question. It should be the first questions out, so if time runs short, we don't forget it or pass over it, or as we get tired later in the day.
I'm looking at this, I'm already discussing, go ahead, honey.
Okay,
I'm
so,
sorry.
well, that really takes care of A and B. And I would think after that meeting, there's gonna have to be follow-ups. And I think we might even, as I said, have to have certain department heads come back to deal with certain issues and questions. Capital budget considerations, we didn't see very much in the current budget, and I'm not sure what's gonna happen on that. We did not receive a 5-year plan on November 15th as required by the charter. I know I was more interested in getting the audit and the management letter than I was in seeing a 5-year capital plan. But of course, now that they're beyond, I'm wondering why we didn't get a 5-year plan. And I would hope that would be a very high priority for the capital planning committee. Anybody have any discussion on capital?
Well,
We saw capital request right now is $365,000.
is that the ones that are included into the operating side of the budget that are showing up as operating items?
Yes, we passed at town meeting a resolution
Right.
to use the meal tax money for capital assets. If you look at the budget as it's written right now, in this current year, the meals tax money was shown as a separate line item and came from the state and was accounted for in that manner. It properly belongs in next year, unrestricted local aid. And that, if you look at the number on the unrestricted local, you'll see that it's been inflated by approximately $350,000.
396,000.
396. Okay, so now it has come, at this point, because it has not gone through the legislature, it's coming into the general fund. So those items which were committed to for capital, the 365, were put in as expenditures.
Yeah, but is this really a proper way to show this?
It is for the time being if you want to spend the money out of the general fund, because you can't restrict the money out of the general fund as a capital item necessarily. I don't have a problem with it for today, but the final budget going to town meeting, it should all be cleared up.
Yeah, I just.
One way or another, there has to be a clear explanation for everybody that's sitting in the auditorium, so they understand why suddenly capital items are not being bonded, or, I mean, the question is, how do we get to the meal tax money?
Question.
Yes, Sam?
The way I read it, and I'm not sure I'm right, was that the only money that was being proposed by the administration was from the meal tax revenue.
That's what I saw too, that's what.
And so it was only that bit, which was required by the town meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no addition.
There was no additional
No.
that I saw.
No
And that-
additional capital.
That was the discussion we had after the fact that, and I believe Mr. Paulson, maybe it was Mr. Paulson, was there too, that we should set aside part of our budget for capital expenditures as well. And we just don't seem to be in that position yet at this point, but I mean, 396, whatever it is for capital is dropping the bucket for what we need.
Well,
Yes, Sam?
I have a question whether the capital planning committee was involved at all in these figures or consulted.
The ones we have now in the budget,
The proposal that was made.
we could ask him.
Ask.
He's sitting right
I
there.
know he's sitting right there, but
Well, that's
I
not
think
very
that
nice.
the chairman,
He's a member of the public right now.
I think that the chairman might have something to
Mr.
say.
Slavin, do you wish to answer the question, or do you wish to defer?
I can answer, basically, the 5-year plan has been submitted to the town administrator. He did have it on November 15th. The items that are coming forward on his budget, which we haven't really seen officially yet, from what I've looked at, again, does not follow what's on the 2013 budget for capital plan. we haven't finished working on it because we're waiting for the town administration to supply us with the form, you know, for our priority list, which hasn't been ready. So one thing we haven't done is done a priority list for 2013, 14, 15, 16, and 17.
All right, so, sure.
But the items that are in the budget for capital items were in the capital system. In other words, no. I guess whether or not he agreed with you guys, I want to make sure that you guys have a pecking order, a number of capital items out there. If those capital items that are being suggested by the town administrator, if they're even in the system as far as you're concerned.
What we're trying to do is so we don't get in all trouble. The items that were basically put aside or pulled for 2011 fall town meeting are, I believe, is what you're looking at for the spring town meeting. The
Correct.
situation that existed in the fall obviously still exists today. That's the best answer right now.
Wow, that was really. Okay, thank you.
All right, I will take you back to the charter, section 5-7, capital improvement plan. Town administrator shall submit a capital improvement plan to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee at least 30 days before the date fixed for the submission of his proposed budget, which was December 15th, which means he should have submitted that to us November 15th. It shall be based on material prepared by the Capital Planning Committee as provided in section 2-5D. The capital improvement program shall include a clear, concise, general summary of its contents, a list of all capital expenditures to be made during the 5 fiscal years next ensuing, with supporting information as to the need for such expenditure, cost estimates, methods of financing, and recommended time scheduling, and the estimated annual cost of operating and maintaining each facility and piece of major equipment involved. This information is to be annually revised with regard to each item still pending and in the process of being acquired, improved, or constructed.
About 4 years short.
We're completely short. We don't even have the description of what the items were, how to be financed or anything. So, I understand they were also extremely busy, and it was awfully hard to do that, and we have fallen behind when it's used.
There's a word in there that's kind of interesting, operating. In other words, it more than implies, it states that the budget shall include operating expenses, the way I read it.
Yes,
For the equipment.
for the
capital.
equipment,
For the equipment, right.
yes,
Right.
And if you're gonna do that for capital item, you've gotta look out several years.
yes.
Okay,
That's why it's a 5-year plan.
well, that's what I'm driving at. We don't, on the operating side, we don't look out more than 1 year.
Shame on
So my
us.
point is that we should be looking out further on the horizon in terms of operating expenses, particularly since the charter, as you just articulated, not only suggests, but demands that operating be taken into account.
Yes,
So, that's my point.
You're at risk of being slapped down. Anytime you're gonna purchase a capital item, anytime we've ever, in the real business world as opposed to the town, you have to have a payback period, you have to have an internal rate of return, you're looking at it not, sometimes even 10 or 20 years down the road before you purchase it, because you have to justify the purchase of that piece of equipment. And I would think that if we're gonna throw something out here on these numbers, they have to have some sort of a pro forma, we'll use that term for lack of a better one, that says this is how we're gonna pay it, what the payback is on it, whether it's a safety issue, whatever it is, but some sort of a 5-year, 10-year, whatever it is, guideline to what's gonna happen with this equipment.
the capital information we have so far also says nothing about the school buses as well. I think we need to take a position on this pretty quickly in this process. I don't wanna get, again, down to the last week where we're trying to figure out what we're doing with capital items. So I'm not gonna push it any further tonight, but this is, in my mind, the opening discussions. I would love everybody to come and we'll get together next week as to how we wanna approach this whole capital issue during the course of our meetings with the town administrator and even, if necessary, the department heads. Sam?
On the school buses, did everybody receive Jeff Sweat's analysis on that,
Yes.
which I personally thought was a good starting point. I'm not,
That was today,
When did that come?
Yesterday?
yesterday or today.
I didn't get it.
I'll tell you in a second.
I got something from Jeff, I haven't had a chance to.
I was gonna say,
I forwarded it to everybody, so
Did you?
it came on
Did
your
you?
town web, yes,
Okay.
I did.
And my phone's loading, I have no signal.
but I personally thought that was a good starting point. One could look at it and want to question some figures, but at least you had some figures in front of you to
And there were still questions with, even with those figures as well, too.
I
because there are-
understand that,
there
but
are
it's a
some
good
cases.
starting point was my point.
Mr. Slavin, did you wish to address the committee on some? You looked like you wanted to say something.
No.
Okay.
I have another gift here for this.
I hate to bring the buses up at all,
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. I received an email from Mr. Sweat, requesting two members to meet with two members from each of the other boards, on the 18th, January 18th,
February,
no, January 18th.
You have a mandatory meeting that day.
You have a school?
Yes, we do.
School
He's
board
proposing a 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock meeting, I'm sorry, 5 o'clock meeting on the 18th, consisting of two members of the capital planning, two members of FinCom, two members of the Board of Selectmen, and two members of the school committee, and the town administrator, and Dr. Rabinovitz. I guess my question becomes, do we wish to consider participating in that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No.
Well,
I would-
speak your yeses and nos.
I would say, yes, I think it's a good idea.
Absolutely.
I would.
Why would you
Yeah.
say no, Larry?
Because in case you haven't been watching what's been going on with just something as simple as trying to get school buses, back and forth, school committee, board of selectmen, it just, I don't know, there's just too many egos in the room, and it's just very difficult to sit through something like that. I know everybody's got their own idea how the plan should work, but it was fairly obvious from the start to me that if you turn it over to a group at like UMass Dartmouth MBA students, let them do a study, financial analysis, get it back and let everybody look at it, we would be so much further along, and that just didn't happen. And I think that had a lot to do with, once again, it must be a control issue, I don't know, but whatever it is, I'm not, if you guys want to, I think that's great,
This is also in contradiction to the motion that was passed by the Board of Selectmen, which was setting up a committee which was going to consist of one member of the Board of Selectmen, one member of the Finance Committee, one of the School Committee, one from Capital Planning, and three members at large. It's a real, this is a briar patch.
Well, but with that said, and since you brought the subject up, it's gotta be dealt with,
Yeah.
it's gotta be dealt with by
Yeah,
April in some
I
manner.
understand, but also the question is, now that I believe that the Board of Selectmen are also proposed to meet with the school committee to discuss their motion at 6 o'clock the same evening, so there's even a conflict there as to the timing.
Go ahead,
I'm a little confused, so you're telling me that the selectmen are proposing a study committee for this issue? A true study committee?
They proposed one as well.
They
That
are
was the
moving,
motion, they put a
are they-
motion up and passed it. That was for the well, there's a lot of story here. They had a motion that they were supposed to address that had been brought to them by their chairman and the town administrator. There was a meeting, and we've talked about this meeting before. The question came up, we're at an impasse, what do we do? There was, all capital items were pulled off the floor, at town meeting, and we knew there was a problem with the buses.
Okay, what
The
I
question
want,
came up to present, to try to present the motion, or to find a way to get the process going again. And Alan has written a letter to the Wareham Weekest and the other letters, the other newspapers, explaining the situation. The original group was called by the town administrator to say, what are we gonna do? What can we do? Is there anything that we can do? All right, to try to get the process rolling again. And what was put together was a motion, which was, and I'll read you the motion, it was moved to request the chair of the capital planning committee to engage college and or university students to develop and complete a comprehensive financial study of the busing and transportation needs of the Wareham Public School District. Said study would include the following components: complete financial analysis of the busing and transportation needs of the Wareham Public School District, an evaluation of privatizing the busing and transportation needs of the Wareham Public School District, recommendations to follow the study. Comprehensive study is to be due no later than March 1st, 2012. A presentation of the completed comprehensive study will be made at a public hearing that includes the Wareham Board of Selectmen, the Wareham School Committee, the Wareham Finance Committee, and the Wareham Capital Planning Committee. That motion was the result of a general consensus that the finances were in the way. How do we get the finances out of the way? Find a college group, come in, an objective group, do the study, all right, and then make a presentation to all the major players. And that was it. All right? That motion was never presented. All right? Debate occurred at the Board of Selectmen, all right, and the motion was never presented on the floor. And instead, they drafted a new motion, which they passed, which was actually supposed to, well, should be probably still taking on portions of it. And let me read you their motion. Their motion was to request the chair of the Capital Planning Committee to engage college or university students to develop and complete a comprehensive study of the busing and transportation needs of the Wareham Public School District. Said study shall include the following components: a complete analysis of the busing and transportation needs of the Wareham Public School District, including our current state cost of operation and safety standards. An evaluation of privatizing the busing and transportation needs of the Wareham Public School District, including costs and impacts on safety. The comprehensive study is due no later than March 1st. The presentation of the comprehensive study will be made at a public meeting. That includes the Wareham Board of Selectmen, Wareham School Committee, Wareham Finance Committee, and the Wareham Capital Planning Committee. Until the study is complete, there shall be no borrowing, leasing, or procurement of any kind of a school bus. Finally, the Board of Selectmen, upon being presented with the comprehensive study, shall appoint a committee to review the feasibility of the options contained in the study. Said committee may serve as an RFP committee, an implementation committee, and complete any other tasks the BOS deems necessary. The committee should include one member of the Board of Selectmen, one member of the Finance Committee, one member of the School Committee, one member of the Capital Planning Committee, and 3 members at large. And this motion was never passed on to the School Committee. They met the next night. This has been passed, they never saw it. Since they never saw it, they never voted on it. That's exactly, you go back and look at the tapes. They never voted on it. That being the case, neither motion, well, there's some question as to whether or not this applied to the Capital Planning Committee. Should it still go to them or not? Because the original discussion was to clear something off the table. And how do you get a compromise together fast enough to go to a university for them to do a study? And that's what happened. I mean, basically, you have 2 separate motions. If the school committee passed, they would have passed this one, or something amended, this would have been amended, and we were already in November, and to go to the college, we really needed to be able to set everything up by the end of December at the latest. It couldn't be done, because it would take weeks to put the compromise together.
okay,
So then we wound up in limbo. Well, now the Board of Selectmen's motion is still in effect as far as forming, it's in effect, but nothing's happening with it right
Right.
now. Now the school committee's coming along and saying, well, we want to put together another committee. This isn't direct conflict. I mean, we're in the middle again. Donovan said, we should facilitate by every means that we could. I disagreed with you, remember, right? I said, no way. Then I became the chairman and said, well, maybe she was right. She was 100% wrong. All right, because there is no facilitating anything between these 2 groups at this point. There's nothing that we can do except put ourselves in the middle. One of the things that also came, you notice the motions, the group of 5 that met, I was there to help facilitate. There was no motion for us to be involved. We're not involved until it comes to us. So there was no need for us to say yes or no to any of this. all I wanted to do was make sure that we were there when it was presented, so we didn't get someone else's interpretation. Now, what can happen on interpretations? Mr. Sweat has said it costs $1.4 million to run the school buses. Mr. Sweat is 100% correct. It costs $1.4 million out of the current budget. Operating.
There you go, key answer.
Then he turned it and put it up against what it would cost if we went and had someone else come in to run it. Now it's 2.3 million. Well, why is it 2.3 million? Because now it includes the buses. No buses going forward. But for the current year, it's 2.3 versus 1.4. His statement is 100% right. You have to come up with another $1 million. But when you go back and look at the 5-year plan, as Dick said, and you start going forward, all of a sudden, it's a different ballgame. And Mr. Sweat's analysis that Sam's referring to is the closest that we've come, but it's still not the same. And the reason why it's not the same is when the bids went out, it was for an average life of 2.5 years, and they were using 5 years in Mr. Sweat's numbers, 10-year-old buses. So we still don't have an apples-to-apples comparison. And now the thing is that we're going into, this meeting is only 2 weeks away, and nothing's going to be resolved. And I'm just asking you, do you really want to be in the middle of this?
No. Well,
Because
now
I
that
know-
you explain it to me, my thing is, you made it sound like the Board of Selectmen was gonna go ahead and make their own committee. If there was an official study committee sanctioned by the Board of Selectmen, that's what we need to be involved with. We can't get into this, oh, we're gonna go talk about it in this group over here, or talk about it in this group over here, because, you know, first off, you know, is that a proper committee? Are we jeopardizing ourselves in some way, shape, or form?
That's
To
my
people's
problem.
perspective of us. So I would say, no, thank them kindly, but until they decide that they're going to form a real study committee with all parties involved, that we can find a solution to this problem, because it's not gonna go away, it's right here in the budget, that's what we need to be involved with. Whether, facilitate them, help them along and say, yeah, you need to push forward and make this committee and go forward. That should be our only encouragement to them. My other thing is, I have a little bit of a problem. I didn't read, I punched through Jeff's little thing there, but I really feel there's some sort of conflict of interest going on there. I really do. Because he serves on the school committee, right, which is, yeah, this is part of his job to find a solution. But doesn't he also work for the busing service? Does he get paid when he drives buses?
No, he volunteers.
He volunteers.
He's the only volunteer licensed driver they have.
Okay, as long as that's clear. And also, if you look at this, where did I find that anyway? Under non-net, just while we're on the subject. Where am I?
Oh, non-net is the busing.
Okay, well, I marked it there and I can't find it.
Non-net is the busing.
Oh, here it is. According to this, we're already 75% over budget for non-net school spending.
No, we're 75%, like not over.
Right, that's what I mean, you know what I meant. 75% expended already. Just pointing that out.
75% through 3 months, because this.
But that's net. So what you have is you have expenditures going out and you may not have received revenues yet. Because
I'm
you
talking
never,
about the busing, non-net school spending.
but there are revenues involved as well. We can go back and question that. Let me take that back. Let me go back and find out. So we have a question as to why the number's so high.
Yeah.
Okay, we can ask the.
Oh, and speaking of revenue, where are the revenues, because it's missing?
It should be there.
It's not.
Some of the revenues were
Did I
there.
miss that?
The revenues for what? There are revenues up over here.
No, I'm talking about the updates, the actual set.
What are we looking at?
There are no revenues.
Last page is revenue.
What do
Page
you
9.
see?
Page 9 is revenues. Oh, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
No, this is just strictly expenses.
This is strictly expenses.
Ken, was it in the box? Because he was supposed to be both revenues.
I'm talking about the updated.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Oh.
There is this, but I'm not sure if it's the same as what.
Now, this is all expenses.
No, well, we'll do another.
That's
My
it?
apologies. Thank you for pointing that out. Let me send you the other way. We do have the revenue.
Who's gonna
Yeah,
say?
we're not real
They were in the
happy
bottom
about
of the
that,
box.
so you know.
Okay, I'm happy
So
with
you
that.
have the revenue.
Thank you.
All right, so the subject at hand was, do we participate in Mr. Sweat's committee on the 18th or not?
My vote
Or
would be no.
grouping, you know, he hasn't referred to it as a committee, but he's referred to it as a proposal of having these people get together to discuss the issue. Sam?
In order to have that committee meeting, the selectmen would have to agree to it, would they not?
Yes, I would, well, yeah, I mean, everybody has to agree to go to it. I mean, we would have to have that meeting, we have to agree to go to it.
It seems to me that clearly school buses are one of the biggest problems that the town has financially. And it's staring us in the face, and at some point we've got to come to, meaning the town has to come to some sort of decision as to how they're gonna proceed on it. We can't decide that by ourselves. The selectmen and the school committee have got to decide, got to get together and come on some sort of plan. When they do, if they ask that a finance committee member be part of the group that is deciding, which is composed of both school committee and selectmen,
What's in there?
I think we definitely should be part of it. For us to ignore the problem and, or say we don't want to participate, I think, I don't think we have any basis of doing that, because this is a major problem facing the town, and we've got to do whatever we can to try and help. But we can't make the selectmen and the school committee agree to have a group.
Oh, I fully agree. What I'm asking you is, what
But
we're looking at right now is
but
3 positions. two for-
if such a group is formed, I think we definitely should participate.
We're looking at 2 requests for committee members.
I understand.
One from the school
and-
committee, which has rights to form its group, and one for the board of selectmen.
And until they decide on that, the 2 groups decide which one it'll be, I don't think we can move.
We sit out until then.
I think, when they decide, I
Right?
think we should definitely participate and do anything we can to help move the matter along.
I'm not gonna disagree with that. I agree with what you're saying. The problem right now is there does not seem to be a clear decision. We have
You know,
2 conflicting, if no other reason, by schedule. All
and
right?
we can-
Where do we go? What
we
do we say?
we can't make the 2 groups decide on something.
Right.
They have to decide that themselves. When they do, we should move ahead. Anything we can do to help bring them together so that they will decide it, I think we should do it. But we can't put a gun to their head and make them decide. That's up to them.
Mr. Paulson?
We have a time constraint, obviously, looking forward here both to when the proposed meeting might be, and then also with regard to town meeting, so there are 2 different time constraints, so we've got to get cracking on this. So my suggestion would be that we send a note both to Mr. Sweat and to the selectmen and say, we've got a motion from the Board of Selectmen that says one thing in effect, different language perhaps, and we've got a suggestion from the school committee that is at variance with the selectmen's motion. And we're more than happy to participate, or have participants from the FinCom. However, you 2 groups have got to get this resolved. Once you get it resolved, and please get it resolved quickly, that's back to my first observation, let us know, and then we'll move forward. If we have to supply one member, we'll be happy to do that. If we have to supply two members, we'll be happy to do that, but just let us know.
I agree.
Mrs. Brown?
I kind of agree with the way Dick and Sam are going, that we would, that we should make it known that we're willing and want to facilitate such a group. And we should, it's clear that the Board of Selectmen and the school committee are never, ever gonna agree on a lot of things. But I think they're all gonna be forced to come up with some kind of decision with the school process. And hopefully when they form their committee, they won't put, somebody from the administration or somebody from the school committee as the chairperson, because we know that doesn't work either, because they just disband. Am I not right, Mr. Chairman?
You're 100% right.
I'll never get one.
Please.
Mr. McDonald?
I like our position as an advisory committee. That's what we are. And I don't, again, my problem is that we have two motions there, two different groups, and they're both already in trouble because we don't have the financial study that is necessary to make that first step for the groups. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're already in trouble right there. And at the end, I agree, Sam, if they can get together and make up their mind and everybody play nice, then yes, we as an advisory piece of that should be part of that. But until they do, we're just
There is
gonna
one
be-
motion for a study, the problem's timing.
Right,
It's
it's
not
just-
possible to get it out of the
it
graduate
ain't
school
gonna
at this point. Yeah.
So
But
now,
there is a motion for a study.
but again, that's, my concern is that until they agree and, to say that they'll never get along, well, that's kind of the problem. We need everybody to get along and make this decision. And because my child goes to school there, and I would like to see this bus issue resolved in post haste. So, once they can get to that point, from our standpoint as an advisory committee, I think we should participate. But only at that point. Before then, all we're doing is knocking heads or sitting in the middle of, was it a battle royal in wrestling, and it's not what we're here to do.
Sam?
Mr. Paulson made a suggestion,
Yes.
and I'd like to put that in the form of a motion, that such a letter be written to the selectmen and to the school committee, saying that, pointing out that we have two proposals, that we are happy to participate in any way where we can be of assistance in resolving this matter.
As liaison, would you draft that letter, please? Do I have a second?
And I think we should.
As liaison,
I think we should.
I'm not being smart,
No.
I mean discussion, there is discussion.
I honestly think that you should take it a step further and let people know that we want to get this facilitated. We want people to know where the roadblocks are. And maybe the people will get angry enough and they'll say, hey, look, you folks have got to get together and you got to come up with some sort of decision here.
The main thing I'm concerned is we make
Wait a
progress.
second.
No, I just
There's a motion on the floor.
There's a motion on the floor.
I seconded it
Okay.
for discussion, so
For
you
discussion.
can go ahead and discuss it now.
I think it's the right way to go, but I think as liaison, you have a pretty good idea of what you want to say. You can make it, if you'll draft it, I'll sign it. If the committee agrees that that's what they want to say, not a problem, we can make it friendly, but if you draft it.
So blessed.
Gee, that gives it,
Any more comments on the motion?
you'll sign
All those,
anything
not
I
anything.
write?
Go
All
ahead.
those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, 600. Can we have that ready by the next meeting, please? Stay on schedule like we
No, I
usually
think we
do.
should try to get it out early. We've got a time constraint, we know that. I think we should, quite frankly.
But we won't be able to meet as a group to say this is the letter that we want to present, so next Wednesday will be soon enough.
All right.
I'll have it to
I'll
the,
take it a step further and let him send it. I
I
trust him.
Yeah,
He knows what's gonna be
I
said.
would propose that if you approve of the
Yeah.
letter, that.
not if I approve, that's the problem, is if they,
we're getting a little too formal here.
Yes,
We've
we
got a
are.
time constraint.
Wait,
We've got a
way
time
too
constraint, let's move
Right,
on.
let's move along.
Yeah,
We
let's
know
do
we
it.
wanna
I know
do it.
what we're gonna say. We're gonna say basically, hey, we've got two proposals in front of us. They vary, we wanna help, but you guys have gotta come to a decision, and you gotta come to a decision fast. That's what the letter's gonna say.
Then I'll take let's take I'll accept the motion that as soon as the letter's ready, it should be signed.
Should I
So moved.
retract my original
No,
motion?
you don't have to. No.
So moved.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 600. So a motion to send a letter upon drafting completed. All right, I'll do that. I don't need to be excessively formal, but if we're not, then there'll be objections to things.
Okay.
School committee budget. We had an all-day meeting with the
Yes.
school committee. We did not have a quorum, so we never called the meeting into session. At the high point, we had 4 of our members there. Most notably, Mr. Vidal was there, Mr. Gray, and Mr. Paulson. Hung in there for the whole day, along with yours truly. I would also say that we had no members of the public, unfortunately. We had no members of the capital planning committee, and we had, I'm sorry.
Mr.
you
Trudell
wanted
was
to-
there.
I'm sorry, we had a member of the capital planning committee for about an hour and a half,
Mr. Trudell was
all
there.
right? And yes, Mr. Trudell was there for, he was the
Capital
other.
plan.
And we had no members of the board of selectmen. It was a long presentation. I think it's an excellent presentation. It is replayed by the television stations. I know some of us work, et cetera. If you have an opportunity, it's split into 2 3-hour sessions. I'd very, very much recommend that you take a look at it. At least you can understand what the principals and the administrators are facing on the school side. That doesn't mean that we have to approve their budget or anything, but at least you understand what they're bringing and why they're presenting the numbers that they're presenting and the concerns that they have about performance of the system at this point and what they feel needs to be done. I highly encourage everybody, including the public, to watch those 2 3-hour sessions. If at any point you'd like a copy of what the school budget is, let me know. I'll send you a copy of mine.
Please.
All right, I'll get a copy
I
for you.
was ill and I couldn't attend.
If I might, the school budget, as I recall, from that meeting was somewhere in the neighborhood, I'm gonna say $27 billion,
The total amount,
which was well above what we had budgeted.
the total amount is $28,786,47. Is what what the principals and administrators requested. All right, that is not what the superintendent feels will be his final submission, nor is it anywhere close to what the town administrator feels in his, or I'm sorry, not feels, but he's proposed in his budget, which I think was 25.8. So between what the people in the classrooms are asking for in the schools and what the town administrator has put in his proposed budget is some $3 million.
Right.
And somewhere during the course of the next few months, we as a town need to reconcile that.
That is exactly the point I was gonna make. Thank you.
We need to reconcile that. A great deal of their concern centers around the MCAS and SAT performances and the educational needs of the town for economic development. And they made that very clear that in that presentation as well. The gentleman will agree that was one of their concerns was the labor pool going forward.
They should be concerned.
Town meeting preparation, I'm board, Kelly's given me a tentative schedule, I'll publish it for everybody, so we can get it out, get an idea of what the events will be, not so much, I know we have a list of the dates for meetings, but this will be for when publications will occur. Should we say all the drop dead dates are on there, the dates that we're really in trouble if something doesn't happen. Before I leave the budget, does anyone else want to, Dick, I wanted to bring up some items, but are they for tonight, or should they be, maybe
No,
we'll bring them up
I
next week in our
have-
discussion of the
I have
questions?
2 or 3 items that I've been looking at, and
Okay,
let me try to go over them briefly. On page 1, yes, of the town operating budget for 2013, I'd make an observation. The property taxes that the town appropriated, including 2.5 authorized and growth, was 30,410,270. Does everybody see that figure? Because it's important in the context of.
The appropriated 2011, correct?
That's what it shows, 2011,
All right.
30,410,000. If you look at the next column, it says unaudited revenue of 30,100,491. That is approximately $400,000 less than what we had appropriated. I'm gonna make,
All right, that's a question that we'll have to ask too, because the numbers that were put in there, all right, were the numbers prior to Power and Sullivan final adjustments. So that number may, in fact,
Be
be
higher or
higher or lower.
but let me now make a point here. If you go over to the 2013 request from the town administrator, that is up $1,134,000 from the FY12 budget. In other words, from the 30,410,270. I apologize for throwing all these numbers out, but that's a substantial increase, and it works out to, as it shows here, 3.6%. My question was and is, since we apparently, and I take your point, Mr. Chairman, but we're short by $400,000 in terms of our expectations, and again, I use the word apparently, I have questions about how valid the town administrator's assessment, I'm not, being critical of them, but how valid is the assessment that will add on another $1,134,000, given that we apparently, to use that word again, are reasonably short of what we thought we'd have for 2011. So that is a question that I have.
All right, that'll have to be answered. The question is, what is the final, what is that 30,100? And remember on these, the
30,100,000.
The 30,100,000. That 30,100,000 becomes the opening balance for FY12. All right. I had a question. How does it go from 3410 to 3487? That's a question I have. But remember, for fiscal year 12, the property taxes come to 31.5. That's the starting number, all right, in 13, and then you add in the 2.5 increase, et cetera. So the first $1 million comes out of the 2.5 increase.
Well, to that point, it would be nice to know, to de-aggregate the levy base. In other words, we were looking for 29,373, I know.
Thanks.
And we say we got 30,100,000. That 30,100,000 includes the new growth and includes the 2.5 authorized. It would be nice to know how those broke down in terms of if there was a shortfall, where it came from.
Yes, we can ask. Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what we should ask for next. All right, that's what we'll ask for next. Yeah.
All right, on to just 2 more points here. On page 3 of 7, legal services. And again, I realize this is only through 3 months, through 9/30, so 3 months. But if you look at it, we've spent $74,000 in the first quarter. Multiply by 4, and you come up with
What are you talking about? Legal, yeah.
page 3,
Yeah.
legal. And if you go to the 3rd column, it shows the revenue expenditures through 9/30/2011.
Oh, I got you.
We'll say it's $75,000 times 4 is roughly $300,000,
Yep.
right? We're budgeting for legal something well less than that, like $235,000. Now, the point I'm going to make here is that this is a material variation, at least, again, for a short period of time. I understand that. But the point I'd like to make, and have made before, is that when there are variations that are significant in nature, that we get an explanation before we have to ask. Because it may be seasonal, I don't know. Which gets me to the next point. And that's on the police.
I don't see excuse me, where were you looking?
Right here, there's $75,000.
Are we at 3 or 7?
3 to 7, yeah.
Right there, $75,000. That's through 3 months.
Okay.
Multiply that by 5,
Gotcha, I'm
You-
sorry,
Okay.
gotcha, thank you.
And my final shot across the bow here is on the police.
Is that
And on that page,
3-7?
That's 307 on the bottom.
page, where am I on the police expenses?
3 of 7.
3-7, same
Seven.
page.
Okay, 307, my apologies. Okay. Now I'm going to go back and forth from the variance report to the budget. And I'll make the same point on the variance report that I've just made on the budget, and that is if something is significantly at variance, that we should know about it beforehand. If you look at page 4 of
All right, we can ask that, because there's gonna be a great deal of seasonality involved in the police numbers.
but I backed it out.
But you also have even, remember, all of our details are billed through the general fund, all right? The revenues come into the general fund and are billed out as police overtime wages. So any road constructions or anything else that are going on can influence that number pretty dramatically and still not be out of line with what was originally budgeted.
I have no
except the
problem with
overtime
that
line.
if it's explained before the fact. instead
Right,
of us
well,
having to
we'll have to ask, well, I think that we'll all wanna know based on, I'm not trying to catch up. Next week we put our questions together, we wanna break out the overtime and the wages, that's simple.
I'm just trying to make the point here so that everybody understands what I'm
Right.
driving at. It
Mhm.
looks on this that we're $1 million over budget through the first quarter.
Yes, it does.
If you pull out the seasonal police,
Seasonal,
which in
yeah.
the budget are about 90,000 a year,
Mhm.
say 100,000, you're still over budget, probably. Not by $1 million, but by something less than that.
Well, we
But
also-
nonetheless, it's a question that should be answered, and again, I would suggest it should be answered before the fact, rather than ours having to sit here and try to move through it on our own.
Right, okay, and the budget is typically presented as one number, we just need a breakout on that number. I don't know if we have, we may start to already,
There's also the hurricane in that number, I believe, too, and then there's reimbursement, but I'm still thinking it's a little high, even if you go through that, it looks a little bit off, still.
those are probably, but as you said, it should be explained.
Right, I agree with that.
But because you had mentioned that, and I actually, there were 2 places that I looked for that. That was under municipal maintenance and the police.
Well, the police were out in force. so-
I know that, I understand that, but it was like, the police still look a little high, but municipal maintenance looks normal, except for their expenses.
That's because they only have so many employees, where I think they were budgeting for additional employees and didn't hire those, I believe.
And I stand in error and can be, maybe corrected. There's one other point, and that's on page 6 of 7. And that's the medical insurance.
Excuse you.
We show the medical, if you look at the variance between the F13 budget and F12, it shows that our medical expenses are gonna go up by, let's say $1.2 million, $1.160
Oh,
million.
yeah, I saw that.
And that's a 28% jump from 4.19 million, 4.11 million, right here.
Yeah, that's it, I saw that.
And that in turn, that 4.11 million, somehow or other, it was 5.5 million the year before. We let it get down to 4.11 million, and now we're saddled with 5.3 million.
Yeah.
And a question, and I will direct this question, and I totally agree with you, Frank, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious about how our 5.3 million breaks down in terms of paying for retirees versus regular employees. I want to get a better personal feel for that and what the trend is, because having a jump of $1.2 million is obviously very significant. And I've talked about gas B45, so that everybody's gasping. We've got an $89 million liability, and we're not recognizing anything. We're not doing anything about it. Oh, I'm sorry, we're footnoting. How foolish of me. As if that's gonna take care of it. And there's nobody here, for the most part, that understands what gas, I think in the committee we do, but who at home, that understands what's in the process of happening. It's a big liability, and it's growing a couple $1 million a year.
All right, let's keep in mind also
Okay, and that's
the
it.
2012 budget includes
The drop, yeah,
the holiday.
the holiday.
Yes,
All right, if the holiday hadn't been declared, then we're basically at the 5 million.
I understand that. I understand that.
So, yes, no, any questions on that stuff? And my greatest concern is, are we properly reserved at this point? And I think based on what we're hearing, there's a very good chance that we're not, which means an increase for the people that are in the plan, they'll have to add, which as well the town. Any increase that has to be covered in the reserve has to be covered by both the employee and the town.
Can I be unaccounting type for a minute here? So if we're not properly reserved, and according to everything we heard, that the employees have still not received their holidays, is the portion that the town was going to use to supplement the budget, has that already been taken out?
It's not taken out. I mean,
Well, okay, I
I don't
understand
like
what you're
that
saying.
taken out. I
Well, let
just
me use-
decided the other day. It's not taken out, it's just not being put in.
Put in.
Okay, sorry, I went off the reservation for a minute. Did we not remove, back, can you double negative that? So basically, we did not pay the, whatever it
Okay.
is, premium for that.
We don't know that.
We don't, that's what I'm
We don't
asking.
know
Well,
that.
that's the question,
I mean,
so
we
that's
can't- we
another
can't say
question we
that.
need to ask.
I mean,
Because of
we
the,
need to ask you if, how it's been dealt with. And I have no indication that it's been touched at all,
Okay.
or that they could still be making the town number as well. But I'm not sure, because we're also looking at our
I'm not
updates
seeing
that
the
we're
variance.
receiving, and we don't see,
I don't see the
Dick
variance.
keeps asking, where's the money, why aren't we paying something? So it may already have not, well, we're gonna have to find out.
Because that's a serious issue if the town has, and the employees haven't got their side of the equation yet, I think.
Could talk about, I'm not sure it is, as long as it's paid within the year.
Okay,
Morally, it is. You're right, whatever one does, the other one does. But from an accounting point of view, it can be paid as long as, if you do one, you have to do the other, or you have to put the money back in.
that's right.
The town has to make it 75%.
I just want to
For
reiterate
whatever
that the
was
money
not-
was never touched. It was
Whatever's
just-
not
or
paid
taken
by
out.
whatever the employees have paid has to be matched.
That's correct.
If it's reduced, there's no problem.
That's
If it's
correct.
not, then the 75 has to be paid back in.
It's my turn?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question, and maybe somebody addressed this in or out or whatever, but, I went to get this book today, and then I thought I was late going to get it because I was told, I told you on the phone that I figured that it was supposed to be out before this. And now I'm looking at these numbers, and what is this column FY 2011 expended pre-P&S audit?
For the Powers and Sullivan.
That was before the Powers and Sullivan adjustments.
Okay, so
Then, in that column will change, right?
I understand that, and that's my complaint right there, is what was the point? What was the point in even printing that out when that column is absolutely totally useless to us?
Because there has to be an estimate for that year, this budget order has to be in there. They don't have the final, you're saying leave it
Yeah.
blank for the current year?
No, my question is, so when this, okay, the audit was finished, okay? When were these reports run? Do you mean to tell me that these numbers aren't available now?
12/15, the report's run, it says right at the bottom. of
The
it.
reports were run on 12/15,
Mhm.
and those figures weren't available? Those figures weren't updated?
Well, sorry.
I would have to find out where they stand on those
I'm
numbers.
just-
going
I'm
on.
just-
I mean,
I'm just going
supposedly the
on-
audit's finished, but I'm not sure what the final, I suspect the final entries have to be in there because they.
Okay,
have to
I
state.
just,
Well, they do, but I think they concentrated on getting this done.
Yeah, that's the whole
I
thing.
think
is-
they were looking to get the Schedule A done before they got this, so you're right, it should be here, but I believe that might be the,
And the entries may even begin, the problem is producing these reports at the same time. We don't have enough people in the accounting. department.
okay, I
Even with
understand
the
that.
consultants, we are, and they only get so many hours of it, we are short manpower dramatically.
consider.
Anything we ask. You know,
Well, I understand that, but I just wanna go on record saying that I'm very disappointed that, that was a tool that was gonna help all of us say, okay, this is what was expended, this is what we really, really used, what we really expended out, budgeted to expenses, and making a decision for a final budget. I'm just very disappointed that those numbers are absolutely totally useless.
my understanding is it's been a repetitive thing over the years.
Yep.
And there was even an attempt to revise the charter, to move back the entire process for 30 days to prevent this type of thing from happening, and it was turned down by town meeting. And we've been presented the best they could present us on the date that they could present us.
Okay.
all right, with the resources that they have, and I really want to raise that issue of resources. They do not have the resources.
Well,
And I'm not trying to be sympathetic, I'm trying to be pragmatic.
Well, I understand that, but like I said, I just went on record to say that I'm very, very disappointed.
Right? Dick?
well, I hadn't thought about it, but I could see Bonnie's point, and I totally agree. I mean, how are we looking at this FY 2011, just looking at the town clerk? The budget is 137,000, and supposedly, if I'm reading this correctly, $62,000 has been spent. You know, if it had come out at $131,000, I wouldn't question it. But it's roughly half of what it should be. We should know. And I'm just looking at one page. I probably, now that Bonnie's mentioned it, I think
They're all like
that's
that.
well, she says a lot.
Yeah, they're all like that.
And
We have what we have, and we have to question what we have if we have questions.
well, she's asked the question, and I'm seconding it in the sense of my understanding of what she's suggesting. We don't have the numbers, and we can't very well make, at least in my mind, it's gonna be difficult to make assessments as to looking at the 2013 budgets based on what we have here.
I'm not going to disagree with it, but there's also the thing that says, you know, if I have nothing, I have nothing to compare against. That's what our alternative is, nothing. Now, what we can do, we may be seeing another accounting problem, and they'll have to tell us what the adjustment was that had to be made, which I think is significant unto itself. But to put a blank column in would do nothing for us. Or the other side is to just ignore it. If it does nothing for you, ignore it.
Well, that's the thing, is
You
it
go with that
would
because
have done
it's
something for me because it would have been valuable
I
information.
can't get, nobody can get it.
I understand, Frank, I really do.
I know, it's frustrating, I will 100% agree, it would be nice to have the final numbers in here. But the timing, we know the timing is bad. We tried to change it, by the way, I say we tried. There was an attempt to change it by charter, and the town said, no, leave the dates as they are. So we're stuck. And that would improve next year, right, because the audit will be complete much sooner. And that's the other thing, is as the charter was written for everything to fall perfectly. The audit would be finished by the end of September. And that, you know, it didn't happen. So that's what we're gonna have to live with. I apologize, there's nothing we can do about it.
I would hope that maybe he'll have better numbers. It just seems like such a waste of paper though, Frank. I mean, it's just like, this is what you get because the charter says you've got to present it on a certain section of time, okay, understandable. But, you know, throughout this process, you know, if he's got better numbers, they're certainly gonna be more helpful to me. You know, I can say to this department head, well, this is what you really spent last year.
The only alternative is to put off all meetings until such times as they can present us with those numbers and then meet, which means we're squeezing against the warrant.
I understand, yep.
And like I said, if everything went right, the timings would work, you'd have better numbers to work with, et cetera. But the only alternative we have at this point is to say, okay, we're gonna do nothing, and we'll wait for the revised numbers to come out. And right now, we're working on the free cash calculations, et cetera. It'll probably be 30 days before we have it, which means we need to postpone the department head meetings. And the question is do we postpone it for the few numbers that might be wrong, or do we assume that all numbers are so far off that we can't do anything?
Well,
Tell me what you want to do. I'll do it. You want to reschedule the meeting, we will.
If I might make just another observation and following on what I said, suggested here. I'm looking at town clerk just because she found it. The budget for 2011 was $137,000. The FY 2011, excuse me, expended pre the PMS audit shows at 62,000.
So there's a question there to answer. My question is to you, do you wish to postpone the January 11th meeting until such time as the final audit numbers are available to put in the book? Is that what you want to do?
No, I want to squeeze until he gets them to me.
Well, this is
Can
a
you
simple,
rewind
it doesn't do any good. Look, talking about it from now till the cows come home isn't going to do anything. The question is do we have the January 11th meeting Or do we put this book aside until such time as the next round of figures
Well,
come out?
if I might just continue, just for a moment here. If you take and divide 137,000, the supposed wages for the year, by 12, you get about roughly, I'm gonna say $10,000 a month. Just for rough figures here, to make a point. And this shows $62,000, so it's about 6 months worth of wages, give or take. And the town administrator has been told on many occasions, he's to reconcile cash every month. He's heard it from everybody. He's tired of hearing about it, I'm sure. But what this looks like is we've only got 6 months of figures here, maybe 7, maybe 5, I don't know. But that is not adequate. And so to say, well, we can't do it, or should we hold off? Quite frankly, if it's a question of holding off, yes, I would hold off, because we don't have figures. How are we supposed to make judgments? We've been doing this for
Okay,
years.
fine. Anyone else have comments? You made your point, all right?
Okay, and
You
I'm
feel-
gonna make.
You feel the numbers are not worthy of your time, all right? Because,
think
you
it's
need updated numbers, so you want to postpone the meeting.
I think there's 7 pages at the beginning of this thing. I can guarantee you between now and when we have those meetings, those 7 pages will be changed.
Okay.
Well, I bet you electronically we'll get those pages. Do you not agree that they'll get an update?
We may or may not. The key thing right now is the emphasis is to get the free cash settled and then to get all the reconciliations up to date, all right? To get the last of the reports to get much closer than we are, being 45 days out, et cetera. There are priorities that have to be addressed.
But
And once they are, then they'll be back to discussing these numbers. You can request they shift their priorities and see what they do.
Well, I guess my thing is, the questions we're going to ask now are different than the questions we probably would have asked if the numbers were different. So, look, I'm ready to go at it however we go at it, because this is my first budget, and I'm gonna look at the numbers and ask the questions. That's the truth. That's what we'll do. Whether or not they're correct, if they're not correct, then they're gonna have to come back and tell us they're not correct, and then we'll get into a whole different line of questioning about why they're not correct, but we gotta start someplace.
I agree.
Originally I asked everybody, do you want to meet on the 11th or the 25th? Everybody said the 11th, we set it up. I use the 25th as the public hearing date, no matter what, I won't change that. All right, but if you want, do we want to postpone doing anything until such time as we have updated numbers?
No, I'm not gonna push something back, but I just will say that, I would hope that at some point during this process, they could provide us with more accurate numbers. The only thing is that I don't understand, how can the town administrator come up with his budget if he doesn't know what was actually spent in 2011? You can't tell me he doesn't know what was actually spent in 2011. And if he knows, then we should know. We should have accurate numbers for that, all right? This is 2 years in a
I
row.
will not
of
disagree
this.
with that. It's a matter of what's coming out, when it comes out of the system and when it gets printed.
I mean, if it's a matter of manpower to produce the report, well, whatever, we need to have accurate numbers to make a reasonable decision. Otherwise, we're just saying, okay, whatever the TA
Right.
says is fine.
We're just singing the same song over and over again. We really are. I mean, we know we're gonna get updated numbers as we go through.
Yep.
At some point, the final numbers will come in. Hopefully, there will be very few adjustments, and we will already have covered 75–80%. The other side we have, remember, is, as I said, we're talking about, do we squeeze against this late close, or do we squeeze against the warrant? Which way do you wanna go? And nobody's answered that for me yet. Do we wish to stay with, and use
I
what
wanna
we
stay,
have?
I wanna stay with what we have.
The heads on the 11th,
Yep.
we need to, any of those crazy numbers like the town clerk, we definitely have to have addressed. We have to ask those.
Okay.
Nothing else we can go through and identify those next week, is any over 50%, we want an explanation.
Okay.
Now, like I said, in a perfect world, we would have had the audit at the end of September, and we would have been all set. We might even have finished by now, because December 15th is the proposed date.
We didn't get these till tonight, so.
Right. Well, that's a long story too.
I know, and I'm not.
You weren't there yesterday when helping us.
You know what? Trust me, if I had the time, I would.
Yeah. Are there any liaison reports? School committee, capital planning, water pollution? Anyone else? Any others? New business, anyone else have anything that I should have known about? None?
I got nothing. I'm good.
Sandy?
I wouldn't dare say that there's anything you don't know.
No, the rest of the committees,
Or even apply for
they're
that.
terrible.
All right, who put
All
my?
right, next meeting will be on the 4th, 7 PM here. And it will be on the 4th.
What?
You breaking this one? My pockets are upside down.
That's okay, simple things are stuck together. I mean,
I went through and very carefully ensured that the pockets were on the bottom, so somebody must have rotated it.
My pockets are on the bottom. Well, I guess they could be. Yeah, all right, they could be.
Caroline, can I motion to adjourn?
So
So
moved. Second,
Second?
third.
Who moved? I'll say Mr. Paulson made the motion, Mr. McDonald seconded it. Take the second away from Mrs. Brown. All those in favor?
I.
Aye.
Opposed? 6-0.
Take your deadly cookies away.
So it's-
Thank you, though.
It's 7 o'clock.
What?
7 o'clock.
You said 7 o'clock at our next meeting.
Oh, 6:30.
Oh, great.
6:30.